Thank you both for speaking with me today. And I'm going to say outright, congratulations on this documentary on one of the greatest bands of all time. And first, I'll go to you, Robert. This documentary premiered at South by in 2023. What we're seeing now, is that exactly the same as what aired at South by Southwest, or did it evolve a little bit?
Um, it's gone through some changes since the festival. We started shooting this movie May of 2022,
Sure.
and we were just so like excited and like sort of out of nowhere that we had a chance to debut the film at South by Southwest. So, sometimes when you're making anything, you want to have sort of like give it a second to breathe and try things with audiences, but there was a point in making the movie where we just sort of felt like this is the film. But we were still playing with structure. I think that was the biggest thing. If you were going to look at that cut or this cut,
Hmm.
that cut was also like over 20 minutes longer, I think, from the South by cut. So it was a bit longer because we were still kind of throwing paint on the wall
Yeah.
and playing with like structure. But with any movie, if you ever were to shoot even like a scripted film, usually you have more there than you really need to tell the story. So it's all about chipping, kind of cutting back and getting right into the heart of what this movie is really about. So yeah, we were, I mean, I was still working on this movie up until like maybe like 30 days ago, weirdly,
Wow.
like just going in and I mean, that's slightly exaggerating, but it was just not long ago that we were putting on the final coat of everything, switching stuff out just to make sure it all was we were able to use it all. So yeah, it's a process making a movie. Maybe we'll go back in and cut something again. Like it's hard to like stop. It's like making an album. It's really hard to kind of stop. So
Sure. Well, I'm going to ask this to Soren in a different way as well, but my follow-up to that is, do you remember exactly when or how you discovered the zombies?
Yeah,
oh
I do.
yeah, for Soren.
I was
Soren.
throwing that to Robert first and then
Oh,
For
Soren. I
me.
was going
Oh
to
yeah.
ask you in
Oh,
a
sorry.
different way.
Sorry. No, that's I was sorry. I thought it was for Soren. For me, yeah, I grew up listening to a lot of music. I lived in a household that had music playing all the time. Classical music, musical theater, operas, rock and roll wasn't like the I wasn't my mother was the daughter of a orchestral musician and a composer,
Hmm.
and all of her relatives were all these Italian immigrant musicians, so they were classically trained musicians. My generation was just going to see concerts in LA or listening to bands.
Yeah.
But I was always around people that loved 60s British invasion music, but I loved oldies but goodies music. I love bubblegum music. I love Brill Building, Carole King, Cynthia Weil, Barry Mann, Jerry Goffin, Neil Sedaka kind of songwriters.
Hmm.
Into British invasion, I became a total British invasion nut, just absorbing a lot of British invasion music. But the zombies were always up there. Like they were like, one of the best, right, out of the British invasion movement.
Sure.
But the music just really like held, stood the test of time, really. It was always ahead of its time musically. Songwriting, production, it just was different. It just had something else there, like another unspoken, like special sauce layer of
Hmm.
I can't put my finger on what's really going on here, but there's something really special about this music that just stood out. So that was for me why it was so important for me.
Sure. Well, Soren, when I say that I want to ask that question differently, our mutual friend Tim, who we may or may not have said nice things about before we started the interview, one of Tim's favorite bands is Cheap Trick, which is one of my favorite bands. But in Denmark, I hear Cheap Trick was not a popular, known, commercially successful mainstream band like they were in the States. So the Zombies, how did you discover them? Were they a mainstream top 40 band in your early years?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, I don't think actually many Danes know about the zombies because back in the 60s, the British band that made it kind of big here was the band that toured here a lot. Like the Pretty Things were here a lot. The Tremolos were like kind of weird names, that are not that huge, but they became quite big here in Denmark. But the zombies never played Denmark in the 60s. And I think that's the main reason that no Danes of that generation really know that band. Of course, music lovers know the Zombies. If you're really interested in 60s beat music, you know who the Zombies are in Denmark as well. But the way I got into it was like I grew up with my mom's and dad record collection, lots of Beatles stuff and Stones and Simon Garfunkel and stuff like that, and really loved that kind of thing. So when I was about 8, 9 years old, I got really curious about and started playing music myself. I got really curious about other British bands, and started digging into that. Went to the library, just picked up records and tapes and brought them home and listened. And I remember acquiring a Decca compilation cassette tape when I was about 8, 9 years old, and it had "She's Not There" and "Tell Her No" on it. And that was my first introduction to the Zombies. And then later, when I was in my late teens, I remember picking up a reissue copy of the Begin Here album, and really digging that. I just love that youthful energy combined with this really strong songwriting and special songwriting. It's just, as Robert says, it's hard to say what it is, but it's a mixture of classic influences and jazz, and everything's in there. It's like a melting pot, and it's just quirky songwriting, especially Chris Watt's songwriting is really quirky, and I just dig that. I really like that. I was like, wow, what's going on? This guy, he's not like A B kind of songwriting guy. It's so weird what's going on. And at the same time, these Rod songs, it's like the hits like "She's Not There" and "Tell Her No." "Tell Her No" is probably my all-time favorite zombie song, I think.
Wow.
I really like it. Yeah.
Well, to follow up on that, Soren, when you joined the Zombies, how many of the songs did you already know how to play? In other words, did you have to immediately crash and study, or did you already know it all?
I would say I knew all the 60 stuff. I certainly had listened to. I was a fan before I joined the band. I mean, 3, 4 months before I joined the band, I watched them in London do Odyssey and Oracle, and had no idea that I was going to play with the band 4 months later. But so I was really a fan, and I knew all the 60 stuff, and also, once in a while I would listen to some of the more recent stuff. But it's definitely the O&O, the Odyssey and Oracle song, the album that's a desert island disc. So yeah, I was pretty familiar with most of it. I had to do a little practice on the more recent stuff, but all the 60s stuff, I knew that it was in the back of my head. So it's just a question of actually sitting down with a bass guitar and playing it, But that kind of surprised me actually with the O&O stuff, because what really sounds, like, oh, that's quite kind of natural thing going on here. When you start to play, it's like, pardon my French, what's going on here? These chord changes. It's like,
Yeah.
it sounds more natural than it actually is, And it's definitely, when you start playing it on bass, it's definitely written from a piano player's point of view. It's like all these bass lines is not very typical bass lines. It's like something weird going on.
Good weird.
So yeah. But I'll say I knew pretty well, and I think that was actually what got me in the band, because it wasn't that they had a long line of guys auditioning for them, but I know there was another bass player there who was in the Tom Jones band, and he auditioned for them. And I think what got me the gig was that I knew the songs that well, and I remember one incident in the very first rehearsal, actually the audition. I was telling Rod Argent, that I'm not sure you're singing the right part, because that's not how it goes on the original album. And he just stared at me, and I was like, no, I bluffed it, It's like,
Yeah.
But then he was like, oh, yeah, I think you're right. And I knew, okay, we got a really good connection here. It was like yeah, it was actually like that from the very first moment I talked to him on the phone. It was like, yes, I mean, the first 30 seconds was awkward, but then it was like just two guys who loves music starting talking, It was a great
Wow.
experience.
Well,
Well,
Robert,
and I could say when just
well,
to add like to Soren's, because I got to watch it was so cool to go out with the band and play and shoot stuff for the film. It
sure.
was so rare to the world's colliding of music and filmmaking in one place is so cool. But the show was I mean, watching Soren play, there was just such great energy on stage that I think because you can play like some bands are so technical, they just like play everything obviously perfectly, and it's like everyone's almost like it's like you're like cramming for an exam or something up there.
Yeah.
And then there's the like just like having fun playing music part of it, which I thought there was a great energy on that tour watching the Zombies play and just a lot of fun. And I think the crowd really ate it up, which was really cool. So
Yeah. Well, following up on something you said earlier, Robert, you mentioned that your introduction to the Zombies was more, your mom playing it around the house or basic radio. I thought it was going to be more Super Drag and those kinds of bands, citing them as an influence being your gateway to the Zombies.
well, it's funny. I mean, I'm the youngest in my family, so I have siblings who were in bands or were big music listeners around me. So that was really my mom actually didn't really know. She knew she has a really good ear for just like melody, and she's just been like trained very well to just hear good stuff. She loves like she's not a big rock and roll person, but she loves the zombie. Like now that we made this movie,
Hmm.
when I was like she got to watch it. She just like really loved. She went to the show in LA. It was just fun to kind of show her like bands that I really love, but really of her generation that she really missed out on kind of. But yeah, I mean, of course, like the band, you learn from the bands who learn from da 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 da. So you pass down these traditions of music listening to the next generation.
Hmm.
This movie is the passing of an experience to another generation. This is part of that process. So I do feel so happy that we got to make this film because I think a lot of people are going to discover not only the zombies, but just like really want to dig probably into this time period, which is really cool. So that's exciting. And we need to be reminded of like what came before and really pay
Sure.
respects to that. But yeah, I mean, there's actually a song on a Super Drag album. I think it's from Head Trip in Every Key.
I'm expanding my mind that copies
Yes,
Beechwood Park. Yes.
Beechwood Park, exactly. It's so, I mean, I'm sure there was maybe that it's so right on that it's like it can't be it was a direct influence. It has to be. It was the exact melody.
Yeah.
But no, I have a studio in LA called Beechwood Park because it's on a street called Beechwood and it's spelled differently, but that was a nice little wink at like a band I love and songs I love. But also, Colin's voice truly needs to get like a big shout out because he's a great frontman. Like he
Hmm.
just is. Like not every band has a great frontman. And like there are a lot of bands of that era that just kind of are great, but they just kind of like, yeah, like, oh, there's that song. It's on a compilation.
Right.
Oh, I love that song. But like things just kind of drift away and don't really have that staying power. I think there's just like there is like a magic that was there or is there with those guys, especially Colin in that frontman role. When you see those early shots of him on stage on the Murray the K show or whatever, and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
this guy is so charismatic. There's like a Jim Morrison-ish thing about him that I think he would never talk about because he's way too humble.
Very modest. Yes.
And the fact that he doesn't think he's a good singer, it's just that's just, I mean but that makes sense. You want him to be the guy that doesn't think he's a great singer. Like that makes you love him even more. If he was like, "Oh, I'm the best out there, man," you would probably be like, "Oh, great, this guy."
That guy.
But he's just like he's the not frontman frontman. He's like he doesn't realize what he has there, the power of his voice. But it's like he can go from like soft, breathy like that voice to like this hard, aggressive, like edgy, almost punk rock kind of voice pretty quickly. So it's
Sure.
pretty amazing. And I know his voice had like he can still sing like true. He's insane. Like he still sounds amazing on stage. His voice has changed, almost more operatic kind of a voice.
Hmm.
Like it's almost you can hear when a singer's been coached and when they're just are really raw. Like when you sing it live, you're preserving your voice for the next show. Some singers make the mistake of blowing out their voice on night one and then they sound like terrible, like they can't even sing the second night.
Right.
Colin sounds like the kind of singer where he just was unhinged as a teen, like as a early singer and just did these great performances. And then on stage, it's just like it's powerful. It's a different kind of a vocal almost where he's coming from. But it's like he's been able to maintain great health, great vocal health, sounds amazing. And he's just one of those singers that's like once in a generation or something kind of vocalist
Hmm.
that just brings power. And he had a great vocal career even after the Zombies ended with singing with Alan Parsons Project. He had a band called Keats, if anyone hasn't heard Keats, with like some of the guys from Pilot,
Hmm.
which was another great band from that. But yeah, like he's just that good. And I really geek out on him too when I'm with him. Just, I like, there are singers that you're just like, where is this voice coming from? Like, where in their body is it placed? I have no idea where this voice is. Like, I can't put my finger on it.
Sure.
But anyway,
But I want to say, one compliment to you, one question to Soren, and then you're free for me. And the compliment is it's great to see that Utopia, your company, could put this out. Looking forward to what's to come. Loved The Last Showgirl, etc. So congrats on all that. And over to
maybe,
Soren as the last word here. What's coming up for you? Are you allowed to say, or is it just follow me on Instagram and that's how you'll know what Soren is up to?
Well, you probably know that the Zombie has stopped touring. The band hasn't disbanded or broke up. It's we just decided that it's time to stop touring. But Colin still really loves to tour. So I've joined Colin's solo band as a guitar player. I was bass player in the Zombies, but at the time we start talking about this, he said he would like me in his solo band, and I was like, that's kind of strange to me if the solo band is going to be more or less the same as the Zombies, and so I said, why don't I play the guitar in the solo band? And he said, okay, as long as you're in the band. And I'm really happy with that. We just toured the US and just did a tour of the Netherlands. And the new band is coming together, and it features Steve Rothford from the Zombies on drums, and I'm on guitar, and Dean Anschutz, who was also kind of percussionist for the Zombies. He's also with with Colin's solo band, and then we got Dave Bainbridge on keyboards and Jess Cronk on bass. Two original Strawbs people.
Wow, I didn't realize the
Yep.
Strawbs. Okay.
So yeah, so that's what we're up to, and we're actually just beginning to work on a new Colin album. So new songs coming up, and yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah, that's very exciting. For the summer, I'm touring with a Danish act here in Denmark, doing lots of festivals here. Kind of a closed Danish thing, with that's how the business are here. We have these names here, that are big in Denmark and nowhere else. So, and I'm
in this household, you're huge. Don't worry. So thank you both for your time. Looking forward to both of your future projects, and congrats on this new
Pleasure.
documentary.
awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having us. Yes, it was great.
Likewise.
Paltrocast.